Bosses. They're big, they're bad, and sometimes they don't look like they're a big threat until they are. Like you bit off just a little bit more than you can chew. I'm talking about boss transformations. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 boss transformations we instantly regretted. So just be aware, there are going to be spoilers in this. I know that it's not this type of spoiler that bugs everyone as much as narrative spoilers, but still worth leaving a warning. Starting off with number 20, it's the Elden Ring DLC, Midra, Lord of the Frenzied Flame. Yes, starting off with Elden Ring. If you're sick of Souls-likes, or me saying Souls-likes, this is the wrong list, because transforming bosses are kind of that genre's thing. Also, just a note, I can't control how many Souls-likes there are. I can't control how good they are, which lately quite a few good ones have come out, and I especially can't control how popular they are. So don't get down my throat for saying Souls-likes a million times. I'm gonna. Sorry I had to get that out of the way before I get a million "you're saying Souls-likes so many times" comments. I mean, leave them if you're gonna leave them, but whatever. So you're trucking along in this Souls-like. I mean, kind of the heir apparent to the Souls series. And there's this abandoned mansion. You explore it, got a big old empty room. That's a boss arena if I've ever seen one. But instead of a terrifying boss encounter, it's just a pathetic little shuffling zombie. I mean, it is the very definition of the hanging around type enemy. But he's a lot more dangerous than he looks. He will jump on you and scream like a lunatic, which causes madness buildup, which is something you don't want. It does a bunch of direct damage if that meter fills all the way. Still, not much effort to beat him. Whack him a few times, he's done for, and that's when the transformation happens. It's something else, too, let me tell you. This guy grabs the barbed sword thing sticking out of his skull and pulls his own head off. Then a flaming vortex appears where his head was. This is, without question, one of the most metal things to happen in a Souls game, perhaps any game. Respect to this madman. It's a hell of a boss transformation, and the fight actually lives up to it. This guy's brutal. His attacks hit really hard, and just one or two physical hits from him can kill you. They're at least fairly easy to predict, at least at first, but as the fight goes on, he starts whipping out these screen-clearing giant explosions and mixes in magic with his regular attacks. In any other game, this guy would be last boss material, but there's multiple fights like this in the DLC alone. At number 19 is the Lies of P, the King of Puppets. The thing about Lies of P, this game loves sequential bosses. It's like obsessed with them. Not just these things change up after a while. Oh, you got their health down a certain amount, and that means they're going to change it up. No, they just have 2 life bars. By the time you face off against the King of Puppets, it's safe to assume this guy is going to transform. Usually these transformations are essentially the same. They add new complications, moves to go along with the standard arsenal, but what makes this guy such a pain is his second form is completely different. The first form of the fight is against this big lumbering bruiser kind of boss. The sort of thing where using a heavy, high-power weapon is effective. He's a big target, and that has some slow attacks, which gives you an easy opportunity to get in there and slap him around with something heavy. He's not easy, but he's not super aggressive. So it's pretty clear that he's got something else once you take out the first life bar. So you beat him, the cutscene triggers, and instead of, like going haywire and getting infested with blue goo like the other bosses, his chest opens up and reveals a human-sized puppet. So now you're fighting Romeo, the King of Puppets. And it's literally a completely different boss. Much faster, much more aggressive. And I bet you're regretting bringing that great hammer now. Everyone knows that human-sized boss is the hardest in these games. No surprise there. He's brutal and significantly harder than his first form. At number 18 is Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Zhang Liang. Whoever decided there should be a boss that transforms in the first 40 minutes of this game, mad genius. I don't know if I want to shake the hand or punch him in the face. Sure, the first boss of one of these games can be difficult, but this is crazy. You barely figured out how to parry at this point, and they're throwing this beast at you. You just don't know what you're doing. Before this fight, you're literally like doing tutorials. It's like if they threw Artorias at you as the boss of the Undead Asylum. Beating the first form of the boss, difficult early on, nothing too overwhelming. It's just slightly above the level you'd expect. And then there's a cutscene, and the guy grows a monster arm. I could not believe what I was seeing at this point in the game. Like, they're throwing a second form at you this early. What's even more bizarre is that it's one of the only bosses that does this. Nearly every other boss has one form, but the first one they give you the 2 health bar treatment. At least you don't have to drain the second form's bar completely to kill him, but you couldn't know. Now, the game has gone back and made this guy a lot easier, but for people like me who played the game day one, this was a tough fight. It's like the second or third hardest fight in the game. Only Lu Bu and maybe the last boss are actually harder. Now the fight's a lot more reasonable, but it's a shock to newbies. You're not expecting this. And number 17 is Cuphead's, the final form of Esther Winchester. Depending on who you ask, this may be the hardest boss in Cuphead. Even if it's not the hardest, it's up there. The flying stages are the bane of my existence, and there are so many little projectiles and random crap that fills up the screen, it's easy to miss what's flying directly at you. Bosses in Cuphead are mostly over pretty quick. They only take a few minutes to beat, but you die so fast that it's inevitable that those few minutes are going to balloon into hours. Beating some of these guys is just a matter of muscle memory, and you gotta learn them if you want to win, and there's not really any other way around it. The boss has the most infuriating stuff in Cuphead. Irregular attack patterns, easy to miss projectiles, and some really bizarre forms. The fight starts off at the normal level of weird for Cuphead. It's a cow's head coming out of a saloon with wheels. It shoots ink at you, while vulture prospectors drop dynamite on your head. Just another day in the life of Cuphead. The second form gets tougher but doable. Then you get form number 3, where the cow turns into a big sausage for whatever reason. And then there's form 4, where it becomes canned sausage and shoots links of meat at you with little peppers. For a game that normally gets weird with its alternate forms, this one does go off the deep end. It's so bizarre that it actually does catch you off guard. You're more likely to die when this happens just because you're so flabbergasted by what you're seeing with your eyes. And it's still really hard. Even if you don't know what's coming, actually avoiding this mess is very challenging. And number 16 is Metal Gear Rising Senator Armstrong. At the end of the game, you discover this true baddie, the one that's really the bad guy, is the mild-mannered Senator Armstrong. He appears to be your stock Bush-era evil senator type, like the stock government figure guy who's behind everything. Silly enough when you actually fight him piloting a Metal Gear, but that's the end, right? So it's kind of a shock when he suddenly bulks up and becomes a nanomachine Terminator. The entire cutscene that follows the Metal Gear fight is pure madness.
Played college ball, you know. That's a cushy Ivy League school.
Just completely insane nonsense that has so many iconic moments. I'm not regretting any of this stuff. This cutscene segment is pure gold. The actual fight is when things get serious. He is a muzzly clown, but as a boss, he is not a joke. He's super aggressive, hits extremely hard, and the part where he throws stuff at you, you quickly gotta cut to avoid taking damage. It's super rough. It's an unforgiving battle that is easily the hardest part of the entire game up to that point, and God help you if you haven't mastered the parry. On normal, you can sort of muddle your way through if you haven't figured out the game mechanics, but I mean, you do hit this brick wall of pain at the very end. It's a great boss fight, but it is brutal. And number 15 is another crab's treasure, the King Crab. You hear the premise of this game, and you might think it's supposed to be some cute little Souls-like for babies, but it's not. It's got a mean streak. Not as tough as a lot of the hardest Souls games, but it's not a pushover. One forgiving aspect of the game is that nearly all of its bosses have only one form. They may move into new phases as their health depletes, but they're basically the same boss. When you reach the end of the game at the place where there's this great treasure, you do have one final challenge, the King Crab, Kampcha, the Bleached King. This guy seems like the usual boss for the game. He's a little threatening, kind of whimsical, got a toilet bowl brush as a weapon, but nothing about him makes him seem particularly dangerous. Clearly, this isn't the final boss, and it's not. There's a few more bosses left deeper into the game, so I assume there would be a single form. I mean, that's how the rest of the game has been up till this point. So you beat him, you get the boss defeated message, and then, yeah, of course, he's not actually dead. The king crab sheds his old skin, climbs out, puts on the same novelty teeth to attack you. Look at this thing. It's weird and pink. The human teeth are freaky, and it's going full Bloodborne with the attack patterns. It's super aggressive, bouncing all over the arena. It's got this patented freak-out attack that you're going to love.
Wait.
It's a tough second form that is unpredictable, it's aggressive, and worst of all, it's a nasty pink crab with human teeth. Get it out. Get it out of here. Go. Get. And number 14 is Sekiro, the Guardian Ape, the originator of the Souls-like fake-out. Many have replicated it, but nobody can beat the real deal. The Guardian Ape is a tough fight and one of the most successful giant bosses in one of these games. It's a big monster that manages to fight you like it's human-sized. Successful fusion of a giant enemy boss and the human boss that combines the most difficult elements of both. The first form alone is tough. It'll take a few tries to get through. I know I was breathing a sigh of relief when it fell over and I got the boss defeated message. Of course, that's not the end. Everyone knows that's not the end. The ape gets up, picks up the sword that was originally sticking out of its neck, and continues attacking you as the headless ape. Its moveset is almost completely different, and it now causes fear buildup and attacks in even more unpredictable ways. It's even harder than the first form of the fight. The old weaknesses don't even work anymore. You can't use fire to scare it, so the only way to win is just get good enough to beat it. It's one of the many extremely difficult boss fights in this game, and one of the most memorable boss transformations of all time. You cut its head off, and it gets back up and keeps fighting. And number 13 is Remnant 2, Annihilation, the final boss of Remnant 2, pure chaos. As a third-person shooter, it makes the boss encounters very different from your usual Souls-like style bosses. The inspiration's clearly there, but there's also elements of bullet hell mixed in along with, I don't know, whatever the designers were smoking at the time to make this abomination. It's a dragon made out of dead trees that use a fly's wing as a sword, which is just a weird thing to even say, let alone see. But that's before things start to get weird. Oh yeah, it gets much weirder. It attacks with a mix of long-range and close-range attacks, and he likes to mix in these floating orbs that you have to shoot before they hit you. Otherwise, basically a one-hit kill. The first form's essentially what we've come to expect with bosses in this game. It's challenging, but you can tell what's going on. Not so much with form number 2. After depleting its health, this thing grabs its head, rips it open down the middle, and reveals some kind of human-like form underneath. It's weird, and then the world starts warping around you, digitizing, and visual glitches are everywhere. So things then go off the deep end. Vines appear, they block your movement. Crazy wave attacks and glitching visuals make it hard to tell what's going on. Sometimes the boss just switches between its first form and its second out of nowhere. Pure visual noise, and survival gets to be pure luck at this point. Depending on how you've built your character, the fight can be tolerable or a total nightmare, so good luck with that. And number 12 is Armored Core 6's Mecha Millennia, an extremely challenging boss called the Ibis series Cell 340, but I'm going to call it Mecha Millennia for reasons that will become obvious soon. You fight this thing at the end of the underground city, and it's one of the hardest bosses in the whole game. It's fast, and I mean really fast. In a game where keeping track of bosses can be difficult because they're so fast, this is on another level. It darts around the arena with laser swords, sending waves of damaging energy at you while its little drones are all over the place firing lasers. It can kill you in a split second, but at least it's pretty easy to stun, I guess. So Taking the boss out isn't that difficult, but you know what's going to happen. It gets back up, and now it's much worse. There's drones everywhere. It's got multiple clones with a laser sword. Everything's a lot more aggressive and harder to predict. It's just really horrible. They basically just took the first half of the fight and doubled everything. The only way to effectively deal with it is to kill it as quickly as possible, and if it doesn't give you the opportunity to do that, you're dead. And number 11 is Shapely Fightus from the game Grime. It's an overall weird and off-putting kind of game, but no other moment has gotten such a visceral reaction out of me than this boss's transformation. So this thing is already pretty weird. It's a hand with arms and legs that attacks you. We're already in a bad place here. To make things worse, it's not easy. It's quite aggressive, and it likes to mix in these unexpected things that are hard to adapt to, like these wave attacks you have to dodge through. Beating it is a feat all of its own, but this thing is not quite done with you. For its final form, the boss sheds its arms and legs, just becomes a crawling hand that jumps around the arena and really, really wants to kill you. Literally, all you can do is just try to get away from it. It's so aggressive that anytime you do try to attack it, it's just going to hit you, and it never stops. All you can do is just wait it out. Its health bar drains on its own, so the final phase of the boss is just this waiting game. It gets desperate, you try, you usually fail to avoid getting killed before it just burns out. As one final insult, it doesn't even really fully die when its health hits 0. The health bar goes crazy for a few more seconds, and then it finally dies, just to keep players in full panic mode for a little bit longer. At number 10 is Final Fantasy X's Lady Unalesca. This boss from Final Fantasy X is absolutely infamous. And for good reason. For one thing, you gotta sit through a long cutscene to fight the boss. An important climactic scene, but if you die against the boss, you have to watch it again. There's no autosaves. You can't go back to save before the fight. At least that's the case with the original PlayStation 2 version. So when you die, and you will die on the boss at least once if you don't know what's coming, then there's another 15 minutes of your life wasted as you try to mask through the dialogue as hard as you can. So the first form isn't really anything special. It casts some weak magic. It likes to counter your attacks with negative status effects. Second form is annoying because it starts casting zombie on everyone and following that up with cure magic. If you don't know or haven't played a Final Fantasy game in a while, the zombie status effect makes it so that you take damage from healing. So it's something everybody wants to get rid of pronto. The real regret happens in the third form, where it immediately casts Megadeath, a spell that kills everyone. So how are you supposed to stop that? Oh, right, it doesn't work on people with zombie status, so if you want to survive, at least one person has to have zombie status when the boss changes form. It's not like that's all it does either. It hits you with all kinds of other infuriating status effects, including confusion, that makes your party members act and attack randomly, so you easily get into a situation where it seems like you've got everything set, but with just one more attack from the boss, you're screwed. And yeah, they don't stop casting Megadeath. It happens more than once. If you're prepared to go on with a plan, it is doable, but it's one of the most infuriating fights in the entire game. At number 9 is No More Heroes 2's Jasper Blatt Jr. This is, without a doubt, one of the dumbest, most bizarre final bosses I have ever seen. It's almost like the game is making fun of the idea of a boss transformation with how little sense it makes. Everything about this guy is just baffling. And most of all, this guy, this little short, bald, buck-toothed man-child wearing a green and purple suit is supposed to be terrifying. And the number 1 ranked assassin? The first form's confusing as hell. He just sort of cruises around in this little hover car while spamming laser drones. And the only way to actually stop him is to attack him when he charges through the middle of the arena occasionally.
Here I go! Faster!
That first form was lame, but now it's time to get serious. He injects himself with something and turns into the most intentionally lame superhero you've ever seen.
The show has just begun!
It's all supposed to be a big joke on Batman, I think. Like, he's a rich CEO out for revenge against the guy who killed his parents, which is Travis, the main character. The guy looks like a clown, but he's pretty dangerous, especially when he starts teleport spamming all over the place. That's not great. Beat it, and you'll reach the truly regrettable final form, where he transforms into a parade float.
And that's a wrap. No, not yet. Now that's hideous. Rich assassins pull the craziest Well, We almost got him. The rest is on you.
Yes, it's the easier form by far. He can barely move, but it's quite big, and it's almost like the game's laughing at you at this point. Like, you expected an epic multi-part finale? Well, here you go. And this is what they gave us. A stupid-looking balloon as a final boss. Enjoy!
Bastard!
At number 8 is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Majora specifically. These games usually have pretty easy final fights, but this game does something a little bit different. It makes the final boss really hard. It's weird too. Like, you'd assume the final fight would just be Skull Kid wearing the mask, but the fight starts off weird and it gets crazier from there. The first form's just a floating mask that doesn't really do much. It's pretty easy even without the fierce deity mask. Second form is where things get weird, though. The mask suddenly has a weird half-form head with an eye on it that pops out and grows a little long arms and legs. It starts twitching around, moonwalking all over the place. It's bizarre, but taking it out isn't too difficult with some well-timed arrows. It's the final form where the regrets really start coming out. This thing is a pain. It's actually pretty intimidating looking, and its tentacle whips are actually very hard to avoid. Without knowing what you're doing, this thing is going to slap you around with impunity. If you're too close, then avoiding its attacks feel almost impossible, and you have to be either too close or too far. Anywhere else, and you are getting hit. It's a painful boss fight, and it's so much harder than anything else in the series up to that point. And as an added bonus, it's also really weird. And number 7 is Katana Zero, the secret boss. Take Hotline Miami, make it a side-scroller, and throw in slow-down time mechanics, and you've got pretty much this game. The story's pretty similar, bizarre mind bender where it's never 100% clear what's supposed to be going on. One major character in the story is a psychiatrist. He's your handler and your therapist, and he spends most of the game manipulating you. In the normal route, he doesn't really, get any comeuppance for all the crap he puts you through. But if you play the game in a very specific way, making as many choices as possible that are meant to piss him off, then near the end of the game, he gets pretty mad and injects himself with a combat drug that gives him crazy psychic powers. That sort of thing. It's a secret boss, and it's by far the hardest in the game. There is barely a whiff of supernatural stuff in the main game. So seeing a guy floating around summoning magic hands to grab you so he can float over you and blow your head up, it's surprising, let's say. The only way to get through this part is to attack all the hands before they grab you, which is much easier said than done. Survive that, and the second phase starts when he's tossing psychic balls at you that need to be deflected back. Survive that, and it seems like we're getting to the end where the screen goes black and the eyes start to fill the screen. You gotta kill them fast or they'll kill you instantly, and there's some weird effects that start happening. The screen splits, you get double vision. It's weird and difficult, but at least that's the end, right? That's when the screen goes red and it reveals its final form, a pulsating meat monster that would make Kaneda from Akira say, "Oh, that's messed up." This is where the fight goes into overdrive. He's shooting syringes at you. It's totally nuts. If you haven't played the game before, it's hard to describe just how out of place this is. The rest of the game is nothing like this. It's fairly grounded, even with the boss fights, so having something crazy appear like this is just, it's wild. It shows no mercy, too. It goes hard, and death is pretty much inevitable. The last form, at least, and they do let you continue from the start of this phase if you die, but the last phase is hard as hell. It's going to take some grinding, let's say. And number 6 is La Mulana 2, The Ninth Child. These games are known for their mind-meltingly impossible puzzles and obscure secrets, but they're also action games that happen to have some of the most frustrating bosses on top of all that. The final boss of the second game may not be the actual worst boss, but it does have exactly the same sort of thing I'm looking for, which is some gnarly-ass transformations. Its first form is very similar to many of the forms from the first game. It's a spirit figure that floats around the arena, and it's difficult. Taking out its health bar just makes it stop playing nice. It transforms into a weird, veiny, snaky, wormy thing. It's got a human face. It's got a tail. It's a big knife. If that thing so much as grazes you, you might as well just restart because the damage that thing does is insane. There's also a hand that shoots, I guess, lightning into the air. Listen, I'm not here to explain it. I'm just describing it. The third form is the most infuriating. You're stuck on the bottom of the screen while it shoots lasers at you randomly from above, while eyeballs spawn to the left and right and shoot more lasers. The only way to fight this thing is to ride a tentacle up. Only there is a problem. The boss is protected, and there's nothing you can do to hurt it. The only way you get through this shield is to use the sun and moon mantras, and that makes the mask disappear, and then you can attack its smushed up face. You have to know to do that in the middle of the boss fight, all while dealing with non-stop lasers, and this still isn't the final form. There are more after this, and they're even harder. This one is just the weirdest and most frustrating, so it stands out the most, to me at least. Moving on to number 5, it's Gygus, or Gigas, depending on what you want. I say Gygus. It's just, I think more people say Gygus. The ending to Earthbound is super weird. It's not that the rest of the game is like normal, but the final stretch is especially out there. The only way to stop the alien conqueror Gygus from taking all over the planet is to take a time machine back to the past and destroy him when he's vulnerable. Yes, it's would you kill baby Hitler? And yes, you would. Time travel works on reverse Terminator rules. Human beings can't go back, so you have to become robots to go back. And there's already so many questions that I do not have the time or interest to answer. So you go through the Cave of the Past, the final dungeon, and you enter this weird alien techno-organic place with a giant eyeball that has the face of the main character Ness on it. This is before things get weird. The first phase of the boss is against Pokey, your annoying neighbor who is somehow the right-hand man of Cosmic Eagle, and then Gygus himself, the previously mentioned eyeball guy thing. The trick here is to just focus on Pokey rather than the big boss, and the next phase of the fight will start where Gygus' true form is revealed. He's some kind of formless monster that only has one attack, which says you cannot grasp the true form of the Gygus attack. This part's just weird and really frustrating if you got bad luck, because sometimes your attacks just do not work. Sometimes they make you confused or unable to act. It can be either pretty easy or painful. It's all up to dumb luck, and it's where stuff starts to get especially weird. After a while, your attacks just stop having any effect at all. Literally nothing you do will hurt the boss, and the only way to beat him is to have Paula use the pray command, not just once, but a lot. It's one of the most bizarre and unsettling final bosses in an RPG. In most RPGs, especially of that time, the final battle is kind of formulaic. You fight the bad guy, he transforms into a big pillar of flesh, you beat him up, and it's over. Here, just attacking the bad guy is not enough. At number 4, in Dark Souls 3, it's Sister Frida. It's telling that even though they've made a lot of games after Dark Souls 3, they've made them much harder too, sometimes. but as many as there are and as hard as they've gotten, they have never made another 3-stage boss. I think this might be the one that these guys realized maybe they went a little too far with. The boss at the end of the first Dark Souls 3 DLC doesn't seem like they're going to be that bad at first. The first form's tricky because they turn invisible and they try to backstab you, but it's not too hard to predict when they're going to attack. Second phase, the fight, is a team up, which is obviously just great. Now you got to fight the sister and this big crazy guy with a flaming basin as a weapon. It's hard. If the fight stopped there, it would have been difficult, but it would have been a sensible challenge. So of course the fight doesn't stop there, and there's a third form that's harder than the previous two combined. Even better, if you die to it, you gotta do the previous two forms all over again, which is of course my favorite thing. Better not make any mistakes whatsoever those first two fights, because you're screwed on this third one if you do. It's inevitably gonna take multiple tries, and you're going to start losing your patience, and suddenly you're going to make stupid mistakes on sections you would normally get through fairly easily. I remember being dumbstruck that they seriously had the gall to throw a third form at you. It's not all that different than the first, but a lot more aggressive and has a backfire effect. But seriously, who even is this? Why are they going so hard? The literal gods you fight in these games are not as tough as whatever this is supposed to be. Whatever Sister Frida is supposed to be. And number 3 is the Elden Ring DLC's Radon. This was unexpected. I knew there'd be some surprise in store for the last boss, Shadow of the Erd Tree, but I didn't anticipate this. It's Radon, at the height of his power, returned to what he was before becoming a giant crazy man, riding a hilariously tiny horse. He is just as impressive as promised. He's extremely powerful and aggressive. For his first form, and has an absolute boatload of health. It's bad enough as is, but when you knock his health bar down to around 50%, he just goes completely nuts. For the second phase, Radon teams up with Mikola and goes absolutely balls out crazy, teleporting around the arena, generating giant screen clearing explosions, doing this absurd after attack that's it's near impossible to predict. The second form is just pure pain. He is so fast, he's doing so many different things that are frankly unconventional. They're unpredictable, they're weird, and there are multiple times in this fight where I just have no idea how I died. Like, at least he only has one health bar. It's very big, but at least you know that once it's gone, he's done. At number 2 is Elden Ring's Melania. With that said, this fight is worse. Yes, there are ways to cheese it. People have dissected this fight back to front to find ways to make it easier, but here are the two things that make it so much worse than Radon. First, it's the regenerating health. I can't get over it. It's ridiculous. Even if you manage to block every single one of her attacks, it does not matter. As long as her sword makes contact with you, she heals herself with every hit, and it sucks. It sucks so much. You can get her down to almost dead in one bad dodge, and she's practically back to full health. The waterfowl dance attack is pure BS, too. It's so hard to avoid because it hones in on you, and the attack string just never, ever stops. Just beating her once feels like an insurmountable effort, and then surprise, she's got a whole second health bar and a new form that's even worse somehow. Now she can give you the Scarlet Rot buildup with every attack, which is like poison but 10 times worse, so that's great. Even using all the most broken strategies feels right like it comes down to luck a lot of the time. Absurd, and one of the most frustrating, infuriating bosses of all time, and that transformation is a big part of what makes it so miserable. And finally, at number 1, Nine Sols, Igong's third form. All the previous bosses in the transformations are tough, but this one is the worst. Nine Sols is absurd how hard it is. There's multiple points in it where you beat a boss after struggling with it and say to yourself, there's no way this is going to get any harder, and it does. There's multiple bosses in this game that seem nearly impossibly tough, but this boss is on another level. Even as someone who's totally mastered the parrying in the game by this point, the last boss just destroys you. And that's the first form. It's by far the easiest form, of course. By the time you get the hang of it, the second form comes out, and you get completely decimated again. At least with the standard ending, the fight stops there, but if you manage to unlock the true ending path, surprise, there's a third form, and it's completely insane. They throw everything they have at you at this relentless pace. They add a new attack that is so fast and requires pinpoint precision, while being almost entirely random. They teleport around, attacking you vertically or horizontally with blindingly quick succession. If it's horizontal, you have to deflect it, and you also have to face the right direction. If it's vertical, you have to dodge it, and it's not like they give you a breather after that. The attacks just keep coming. Maybe the footage doesn't do it justice, I don't know, but the only way to survive this final form is to get through the first 2 parts perfectly, and those are the 2 hardest fights in the game up till that point. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time, right here on GameRanx.